Hello everyone. Before I talk anymore, I want to just quickly show off my new tattoo. Okay, this video is about sexuality. And I guess might as well start out with what Jesus says on the topic. I mean, he doesn't really talk much about sexuality. But when he does, this is it. You've heard that it... Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, starting at verse 27. Oh yeah, there is also a little bit of stuff from the Gospel of Thomas that I'm not going to quote. But, you have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Pretty harsh, as the way that most people, Christians included, have probably ended up being in a relationship or ended up getting married, is they at least committed a little bit of lust in their heart, or had a little bit of lust for someone in their heart. However, let's start with, he says, don't commit adultery, and then he talks about it in sort of in the context of don't commit adultery. Now, what is adultery? Being unfaithful to someone else. Some people will refer to it as any sort of sexual behavior, but in the biblical context, usually in dictionaries and in the biblical context probably, it was simply unfaithfulness. So I think it's probably simply just unfaithfulness in their heart. But other people might interpret it differently, and there could be controversy on if Jesus said that or not. But okay. Anyway, I've given my view on that. Enough talking about interpretation. Now I'm gonna go further. Now on sexuality, I'm gonna quickly start out by talking about, in Catholicism there are a lot of Catholic priests have been known for molesting a bunch of little boys. Now the local Lutheran bishop, Anne Svenningsson, was asked to basically her views on it and to comment on it, and she basically said, if there was one Catholic priest who was a woman and had children, she would be that mama bear and would bring an end to all that right away. They wouldn't be doing it anymore. She would have stopped it. I have to agree. Another comment that has been made is that if Catholic priests were married and had kids, they wouldn't be regularly molesting children. But another comment has been that, well, they're told to completely repress their sexuality. We as humans are sexual beings. That's how we were made. We were not made to completely refrain from sexuality. So that's, yeah. there have been some extreme things, like, I think it was Pope John Paul II who said that men should never go lusting after their wives. Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong made a comment on that, saying, then who am I supposed to go lusting after? She's my wife. We lust after each other all the time. He said something to that effect. Part of how, I think I already said this, part of how most people end up married is they're probably attracted to each other. That's kind of a bit of lusting after another person in their heart. So, yeah, here's the thing though, is that, personally I think in a marriage or a relationship, being committed, both mentally and fully physically, is probably the ideal. That's that's my personal opinion. It is the ideal. And I've heard about open relationships and open marriages that work. I'm Yeah, I've heard about so I'd work for some people. I'm not going to judge anyone. And I've also heard major stories about like open marriages and open relationships just boom ending in very traumatic ways. But might just be that it didn't work for those people. Anyway, um, in Christianity, the ideal woman has been Mary, a virgin mother. Ladies, how are you? How are you doing meeting that standard? Yeah, my point exactly. I mean, adoption, yeah, but I mean, usually it's considered best for. I mean, there are a lot of people who think of well, sex basically for having kids and that's it, and that's basically I think officially the Catholic attitude. I think nowadays in most conservative circles of Christianity, it's basically save it for marriage and be basically committed only in your marriage. I mean, so yeah, and I mean I've heard things for and against sort of that attitude. In in the more liberal areas of Christianity, it's sexuality is something that's special. It should be embraced, and I mean, usually it's considered fine as long as it's in a relationship or a marriage. But I mean, before marriage, it's perfectly fine. But in a relationship, usually, although, yeah, and sometimes it can be more there. I mean, I've heard things about like people who are like friends with benefits, one night stands. I mean, to me, sort of doing that, living kind of life in that way, and having that idea is probably something that sounds like it's probably fun at first, but ends up kind of becoming empty. That's my guess. I'm not experienced in that. Now, other things that a lot of people have heard a lot of stuff against things like strip clubs and pornography. So, I mean, it's usually the attitude is that it's demeaning towards women. Well, it can also be demeaning towards men. Although, I mean, my attitude is if they're doing it by their choice, it's not a problem. But, I mean, I actually have sometimes thought that it might be fun to be a male stripper. And I don't think I have the build, but I mean, then there are more and more female strippers of kind of, sort of, that are plus size, and there are burlesque performers. They're starting to promote kind of different sort of body image, kind of all that. So I mean, people learning to love themselves and accept their bodies as they are. So that attitude. In pornography, now I've heard negative things about the industry, and then I've heard some pretty negative things about the porn industry. But I mean, my attitude is that as long as it's consenting adults, that's perfectly fine. Now, I mean, I've heard some pretty ugly things about the industry. I mean, I haven't done my homework, I haven't done my research in that area, but I've heard some pretty bad things. Overall, I think, though, people have sex, I guess it's okay if they have sex in front of a camera as long as they're both up to it. I mean, here's some other things about sexuality, though. Rape, bad. Bad, bad, bad. Taking advantage of someone, bad. Bad, bad, bad. Drugging someone to have sex. Bad. Bad, bad, bad. Doing certain things sexually that the other person you're having sex with is uncomfortable with. Bad. Bad, bad, bad. I mean, it's basically about when it's with people who are consenting, they're... Oh yeah, I haven't commented on prostitution, but again, if people are doing it by their own choice, I have nothing against it, but I mean, situations where it's forced and such, bad. Bad, bad, bad. Now, I guess I should also comment on homosexuality. Well, I mean, a lot of people regularly quote this passage from Leviticus commenting on how homosexuality is an abomination. There was someone who even got a tattoo of that on their arm without realizing that there's also a passage in Leviticus that considers having a tattoo an abomination. Well, before anyone who is obsessed with that passage sees my tattoo, I should probably get it removed. Anyway, to conclude this long, rambly video, I think sexuality is something to be embraced, but I mean it's with someone else who you have consent with, and personally I think the ideal is what's best is to be in a committed relationship, but it's none of my business. Thank you for watching. Shalom.